But first, tomorrow, Victorians will decide who they want to lead them out of this pandemic. Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world, and decisions made to strip people of their civil liberties were made not because of science, but politics. Lazy and incompetent politicians who ignored the World Health Organisation's advice to use lockdowns only as a last resort to bolster health resources have spent this campaign patting themselves on the back. Knowing what we know now, you would think the media would have turned this campaign into a referendum on the Andrews government's handling of COVID-19. But most days, it barely raised a mention, and instead, voters were briefed daily on scandals with previously unknown politicians on topics such as race and religion.
I'm Lauren O'Dwyer, Labor for Richmond.
I'm a lesbian single mum, a renter, director in the arts, footy coach and a proud Yorta Yorta woman.
Lauren O'Dwyer, Nagatha Yorta Yorta Winya Ngana. I'm a Yorta Yorta woman and mother.
My name is Lauren O'Dwyer and I'm a Yorta Yorta woman and mother. It's important to me to continue to reclaim the language of my ancestors and matriarchs further north because just as our language has been stolen from us, as has my colour.
Well, that Labor candidate's story eventually appeared to unravel, with the ABC reporting the Indigenous community was questioning Lauren O'Dwyer's claims. This includes the daughter of the man who was supposedly O'Dwyer's Indigenous link, saying, "My father was not Aboriginal. His father was born in Swan Hill and his mother was born in Richmond. So he's nowhere near Yorta Yorta country." And of course, the media honed in on problem candidates within the coalition as well, namely Renee Heath, who was linked to a controversial church. Opposition leader Matthew Guy said she would not be allowed into the party room if she won her seat. Some were getting a tad excited over what that might mean.
It's too late for the ballot to be changed. Miss Heath's name will be next to the Liberal parties on the ballot for the eastern regions of Victoria, and anyone who supports the party above the line with a 1 will, instead of getting a Liberal candidate, get an independent, extremely conservative and religious representative in the halls of Parliament that, outside of the Liberal party room, will be free to push whatever agenda she chooses.
And Nine's Alison Langdon joined the long list of journalists who tried valiantly but failed to elicit a substantive answer from Daniel Andrews about alleged corruption in his government.
Well, can I just say, Ali, I behave appropriately at all times. That's the oath that I swore.
I just don't think you can dismiss the corruption quite so easily. When you've been involved in 4 inquiries now, where is the transparency and the accountability when we don't know what's happening? If nothing to hide, why can't we know about it?
I behave appropriately at all times. That's the oath I swore.
And the ABC seemed to relish the fact the race is close, as it could mean more Teal independence.
If there's a hung parliament, that could deliver significant power to minor parties and independents, the real wild cards of this election. Houghton is exactly where you'd expect to find a Teal independent. It's an affluent inner-city seat and Melissa Lowe is the Climate 200 funded candidate.
So initially it was like, they were surprised to see somebody running at a state level.
There were also times the ABC ventured perilously close to spruiking talking points for the Andrews government.
We're going to replace coal with 100% renewable.
The state's increasingly expensive, unreliable and dirty coal plants are shutting even earlier than expected.
Transmission lines like these here in Morwell are the powerful arteries that will bring clean energy from around the state and pump it into our homes.
And of course, we couldn't have an election without the ABC analysing it through identity politics, could we?
The 2018 Victorian election campaign was dominated by the Liberal Party's Tough on Crime campaign, focused on so-called African gangs. But the campaign led to lasting scars within Melbourne's African Australian communities.
Many here believe they were used to score political points during the last state election.
It shifts everyone as a whole in Australia perception. Everywhere I go, they think that Africans are bad. You go to the store, everyone's looking at you.
African community members say the Liberals need a long-term plan to rebuild trust.
And while Labor had a tough time selling its big-budget, multi-billion-dollar infrastructure plan to the media, the coalition missed a free opportunity to position themselves as responsible economic managers.
Asked for a total on their election spend.
How much does it add up to?
The man hoping to be the next Treasurer had no answer.
I can't give you the top figure, but I can get that for you. Actually, add it all together in a moment. We haven't added it together in a single figure like that.
His late afternoon release of the coalition costings missing a crucial detail.
So you have a number in mind for how
I will get you a figure within an hour or two. So we'll get you the exact figure. We can do that.
Maybe not. Well, let's bring in tonight's panel, and I'm pleased to say that this week I'm joined by media writer at The Australian, Sophie Ellsworth, and YouTuber and commentator, Daisy Cousins. Well, Sophie, why don't we start with you? It's been a wild campaign. What are some of the more memorable moments, the memorable news coverage that you've come across?
Well, it certainly has, Jack. It's been a big few weeks down here in Victoria, with media covering very many issues that are facing Victoria, but a couple of key front pages that really stood out for me during this campaign was one here by the Herald Sun, which revealed details of Daniel Andrews' fall on those stairs, or steps as we saw, that came to light during the campaign. Now, there was a lot of speculation and innuendo around what happened around the Premier's fall. There was very little details about this fall, but the Herald Sun report here that made front page news by Michael Warner showed that the Premier fell on what appears to be just two very small steps. So this raised a lot of questions, given that it took an ambulance over 10 minutes to drive 1 kilometre to reach the Premier when his wife said that she thought he was going to die. So there was a lot of unanswered questions that probably more came unanswered after that details revealed of where he actually had that fall. And another one, Jack, that stood out for me was the Age front page a few weeks ago, which revealed that Daniel Andrews was a subject of an IBAC investigation. Now, in this report, it was disclosed that when the reporters from the Age put questions to Mr Andrews' office, and various other people, a suppression order was slapped on them temporarily, so they couldn't report on this. And there was a big kerfuffle over whether reporters could report on draft findings of IBAC investigation. So this caused an awful lot of a stir and got the Premier, some serious questions at press conferences over the handling of this. So they were a couple of key front pages that stood out for me.
Yeah, very, very strong news coverage. Daisy, were there any stories that jumped out at you? And I'd also be keen to get your thoughts on, more broadly, how you think the media has behaved this campaign.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned there were a number of scandal stories that were brought up instead of that what should be really a referendum on the pandemic management. And certainly there were, and one of those that has dominated a lot of the headlines was the new revelations about the 2013 crash that Daniel Andrews was in when, as he claims, a bicycle ran into their family car. He said it T-boned them and it was all terribly distressing, and his wife was driving, etc. But the poor kid who was 15 at the time, who was on that bike, has come out and disputed that version of events and said that in fact it was Daniel Andrews' car that was speeding, and has a legal team and is looking to really kind of present an alternative narrative there. And look, that is quite a big deal, and it's I'll be interested to see where the story goes. So I guess it's good that they've covered it. How much public interest is there? I'm not sure. Certainly not as much as the pandemic management, and that's why it was actually very interesting to see on the front page of The Age a Resolve poll that shocked me to the core, which found that actually the Liberal Party and the Labor Party are level in their approval ratings, and that Andrews' approval has actually gone down, whereas Matthew Guy's has sort of gone up a slight bit. And that, honest to God, could have knocked me over with a feather. I relentlessly talk about how completely incompetent the Victorian opposition is, so I don't know, maybe they're doing something correct. There was actually an opinion piece on that front page that talked about how playing the dance, so to to speak, rather than the actual game, might actually be doing them good. Certainly in a country with compulsory voting, maybe playing the man and not the ball isn't such a bad idea. But I agree with you totally about the complete lack of coverage from the media about his handling of the pandemic. And the only conclusion I can draw, Jack, is that what we sort of all knew, a lot of journalists, probably maybe most of them, were perfectly fine with that pandemic management because it kind of benefited them. I mean, none of us were forced to lose our jobs, thank God. I know the three of us are very grateful for that. We were able to keep working. It was great news coverage, lots of clicks, lots of headlines, lots of content. At least you, me and Sophie had the decency to oppose all that kind of handling, because I think we were aware of our luck and outraged at what was going on to other people who weren't deemed essential workers. But the Victorian media, I think, just generally had no problem with it, and their coverage of the election and the issues they have chosen to raise really, really demonstrates that.
Well said, Daisy.